I think the diversity is interesting in the show, but I've stopped becoming interested in trying to see how far boundaries can be pushed, because it's obvious that people have been pushing boundaries for since photography was invented, and I think what you do with the medium is probably the most interesting thing, or the thing that's going to last. Experimentation on its own sort of doesn't really isn't necessarily interesting. It's to do with kind of exact reproduction. So I think from the reactions I've got from people, that's been the thing that's struck people the most. People seem to be fascinated by the fact that it looks so real, and so that's how photography works to sort of make it interesting, or to latch people onto sort of looking at it, or as a sort of a lead-in point. It doesn't have a fixed meaning, and over the time since I produced it, sort of until now, and I suppose going on from that, its meanings are going to change, and I think that's where the interest lies in it for me, is that I can think about ideas in relation to it, and certain ideas intersect in it for me, and I think a big part of my interest in this kind of work is in having a dialogue with art and the kind of conventions of art, and so in a way it's moving away from photography as a strictly defined medium and sort of moving towards thinking about more sort of generalised issues of art. The choice of using this object is quite interesting for me, because it brings up ideas of appropriation, and of course, I think that you can say that all photography really is appropriation. So because you're taking an image from somewhere, and by putting it into a negative form or printing it or whatever, you're sort of making it your own. You're possessing something.
You mentioned appropriation of images. This image isn't appropriate; it's a new image. But in your other work, you have been appropriating images that have already been made.
In a sense, I don't really make a distinction between what would be seen as taking pictures from the real physical world and taking pictures from a book, or because it's all part of your kind of your immediate experience, whether it be. So I don't see that there's much of a point in making a distinction between what I think everything's an appropriated image basically, and I don't see taking pictures from books as necessarily more appropriated than anything else, except that there are problems of copyright, and legally that those definitions are made so that you realise that there is it's somebody else's property already, whereas out there in the world it isn't somebody else's property as such. You sort of got free access to that. In a way, I think that the objects themselves are quite arbitrary, because I've used other things in other works, and I don't have. There's no specific connection to me to the 18th century. I find that you can use objects, you can decontextualise objects and use them to say certain things when they're put on their own. It's just a question of, it's this whole play of dislocating objects from their original context and dislocating them from their original meaning. When you start realising how many sources there are to draw images from, it's sort of you realise how many options you've got.